Hey, Ben here with Stu on the Lake. As you can see, the fall is here. The leaves are starting to turn. In fact, just in the last couple days, most of them have fallen off with the storm. So here's a bunch of wand blanks. This group right here is basswood. Then I've got another large group that is Dutch elm. So here's a wand that's very similar to a lot of folks out there might recognize that, especially the kids. This is a recreation of Harry Potter's wand, and I did it as close as I could based on 2 or 3 different reference photographs. And this is out of basswood. It's got a shellac finish on it and a little bit of wax. So as usual, start with center lines. I didn't cut these particularly straight. I wanted the wands to be look like they were done freehand, not done on a lathe. Because if they were done on a lathe, then you just took parts of a chair apart and you got a wand. And ironically enough, my wife made a comment that a couple of them look like drumsticks. So you could probably get away with buying some cheap drumsticks and carving those. I think drumsticks are made of maple or something like that, so they'd be pretty sturdy. But there's the center lines for the reference. You're going to cut the corners off. I did that with the DeWalt grinder because it's a lot quicker. And you can see there in the background is my iPad, and there is a picture of Harry Potter's wand. And I use that kind of for a rough reference in the back. I'm not trying to copy it exactly, but get the spirit of the thing down. So got the handle in there. On this video, as well as there's 2 of them that I've got edited that will probably go up today. And then I've got 5 or 6, 7 more wands that I did film parts of, and I'll edit those down a little bit after we get these first 2 or 3 up, because the principle's pretty much the same. But they're fun, and they're all going down in boxes down to Madison to the gallery down there. Hopefully some kid will get them as a Christmas present, I would suspect at this time. So I started off with a knife just because I like to switch back and forth, and eventually I'll move into power carving. So the wand portion of it, all of these blanks were done large enough that I can get the handle out of it primarily, or the thicker part would be back where your hand is at, and then everything else has to be carved down to the width of a wand. I've got one, and I did some filming on it, and it was fancy. I spent a lot of time doing strange designs down it, and I got a little too thin towards the tip, and when I was messing around with the finish, I broke the tip about 2 inches up, and I don't think there's any way to repair that. I may or may not throw that in part of a video or show you that. But the goal at this point with the knife is just working down. There's one more hump that's going to go about where I'm working at. And when you look at the wand, it's got the larger portion of it is the handle. Then there's a secondary portion in the middle, and then the rest, it goes down to just a tube, I guess, for lack of better reference. But I left enough meat on the handle there that I can carve that out. That's going to kind of look like a tree branch. And this is an interesting carve simply because it's got, well, in this case in the wand, I put 3 little knobs in there where a branch would have come out. As you're playing with the wood, you'll notice where a branch comes out, there's a dark spot, or the wood spirals around. That's kind of fun to carve in and recreate that from scratch. So these are the bumps or branch portions that are going to go on the handle, and you notice I did an outline of that kind of in the shape of where it's going to end up tapered down, and that will be the high spot. So I'm leaving high spots. I don't intend to cut these 3 pieces down. That's a saber burr in there, and that's the green, which is one of the more aggressive. The red is a little more aggressive than that. I don't use those typically because I don't need to. I found actually very little difference between the green, the yellow, and the white. They all seem to cut relatively the same, in the basswood at least. When I start to get to that elm, you'll see a lot of cases where the white is not aggressive enough. there's just no way to carve the elm with a knife. It's just too hard, and the grain is interlocked, which ironically makes them perfect for these little thin wands because it turns out strong, just like they use hickory for axe handles and that sort of thing. The grain is interlocked and it has a tendency not to break or split off. So, handle, taking everything back down to the basic handle shape, and like I said, that looks like the end of a tree branch. Now, as far as references, if you wanted to be really cautious and go slow, you could carve exactly what you pull down from a reference on the internet. And interesting thing was about copyright. These wands are copyrighted. There's 2 or 3 companies that make these, have license for them off of the Potter movies. I think there are at least 2 that I know of, and they make a different thing. And when you research this, you'll get into some crazy fandom stuff. You'll see a bunch of folks that have 100 wands and like them for different reasons. It was kind of interesting to watch, but they're pretty passionate about their wand collection, and they get right down to what feels good in your hand, what doesn't feel good in your hand, which great super character owned this wand, exactly where they used it in the movie, or in some cases where the wand never appears in the movie. I guess it's kind of like Star Trek fans and any of that sort of thing. They really get into the details of it. Now, these weren't done with that in mind. I just thought someone who might not be that into it would recognize this as Harry Potter's wand. I think, in my book anyway, I haven't seen these movies for a long time. When they first came out, of course, most of us watched them religiously once they came out, one right after the other, and then you wanted to see the very next one. But if you're going to have a wand or identify with any character, you'd have to, in my book, identify with Harry Potter or Ron Weasley or Hermione Granger, if I said her name right. So I'm getting a nod in the background. So that must be, I must have got pretty close to it. So we're just doing the shape, and you saw the secondary shelf that came in on that there. And now I'm putting the tip in. I tried to leave the wand portion of it as thick as I could for strength. If any of you out there have grandkids or kids, smaller kids, especially 5 to maybe 8 or 9, 10-year-old boys, this thing's gonna hit stuff. They have a tendency to want to smash it against things. I think the greatest danger to these is if you leave them laying around and you step on it or sit on it, that's pretty much the end of that. So keep that in mind. If you travel all the way to Madison, Wisconsin and buy one of these wands, and someone loves it and they leave it laying in a chair and you sit on it, you're not going to be very popular for a little while. Or you'll have to make another trip down to Madison to the gallery down there. So there's pretty much the rough out. I'm looking up at the iPad sitting on the stump in the background, and I'm setting that there. I'm sitting that there and using it as a reference. So you can see I'm drawing around where the branches would come out of the thing. Obviously, the concept of these would be that you found the perfect twig back in whatever day the magic was done, and that wand that stick became a wand, kind of like a slingshot. You find the perfect fork in a tree, and it says slingshot. Now, one of the things that's really strange about these, at some point you would need to cut these in half if you were original. And build an original Harry Potter wand, you'd have to make it out of a specific wood, and I forget which wood that was. It's like yew or elm or something along those lines. And then it's really, the other part's really simple. You got to go out and you got to talk to a phoenix, and then the phoenix has to give you a feather. And then you take, I guess, and with magic, or cut the wand in half and put the phoenix feather in there, So that would be the easy part, getting the phoenix feather. The hard part would be putting it in the wand. That's all a bunch of garbage, as you know. All right, so these little burls, for lack of better reference, are standing a little bit proud. What I'm putting in now would be bark lines or grain lines. And that wood burner is a wood burner from PJL Enterprises. There's only one other person out there that I know. There are a couple other people that have them. They're pretty highly rated. There's a video back in there, so if you want to see the rest of those videos, I do several of them on the tools that I'm using, and they may or may not work for you. And I give you what my opinion is of what those tools are. But you can see that's a spear point on there. I don't do any pyrography, wood burning, painting with a wood burner. I've thought about it, and then I don't get motivated enough to do it. I don't know what I would do other than maybe a landscape scene or something. But I use this for the texture, and the texture's in there. I've switched now to an old, worn-out ceramic stone in there, and I'm using it to supplement the grain that I just put in for the wood handle there. And you'll see later on when we get the finish on there, it doesn't look like much right now. Those of you that are woodworkers know that if you wet the wood down, you can kind of see what's going on. This is basswood. It doesn't have a whole lot of grain action in it, so it's not going to do you a whole lot of good to figure that. But once you get the finish on this, the finish will settle down into those deeper recesses that I'm carving in there now. And I'm kind of going with the flow, and this gives you the stone plus the burning, and you can do it 2 or 3 times and make it really detailed as you want. And then it actually comes out looking like a tree branch or a bark in there. I find it interesting that when you see a lot of the chainsaw carvers and they're working with a section of a log or a stump, a lot of times the first thing they do is cut all the parts of it away that look like a tree, and then they carve in what they a bear, a raccoon, a fish, whatever the case may be, and then they go back with the chainsaw and put the bark back in. I guess that sort of makes sense. A lot of this as video, as a lot of the videos I do, I'll run a portion of it in slow motion, and then the majority of it I'll run at 2 times the speed. Typically don't go faster than 2 times because the video gets a little bit jerky, and I don't leave all of it in there. All told, this wand probably took 2 hours to carve. And a lot of this burning, I'm just going to touch it briefly. Unlike on a lot of the birds, it doesn't need a whole lot. It just needs that hint in there. And to me, the burner gives it a nice definition because it sets that down a little bit in there. It leaves a little bit of color because I'm not going to stain this one. This one's just going to get shellac on it, a coat or 2 of shellac, amber shellac, not clear shellac. And then after that dries, which is relatively quickly in a couple hours, I will come back and use furniture paste wax on that to give it a little bit of steel wool after the fact, after the shellac dries, and then I will come back and give it steel wool to make it nice and smooth. And then the last step would be to put a couple coats of paste wax on there, and it comes up with a really nice feel in your hand. So the end of this obviously would be, in theory, part of a tree trunk branch, and it would need end grain in there. And so here where I'm burning in the end grain, and I don't stone this, but cut off a piece of a branch, look at the end of it for a reference, and decide how many lines in there. So I guess if you were to count those lines, there's what, 1, 2, 3, probably 9 of them. So this tree branch would have been 9 years old. So So that's where it goes without the finish. That's after it's been shellacked, and you see another wand laying in the background there, and that is a fair representation of Harry Potter's wand. And I would think that would be the most popular. There's another wand laying in my lap there. I think that might be Ron Weasley's. I don't know. I did copy 2 or 3 of them. Snape's, Ron Weasley's, blah, blah, blah. So if you're a Harry Potter fan and you're watching, I will do probably most of the main characters. And like I said, I should be doing birds. I should be doing that raven. I should be finishing that dragon. But I was just thought Christmas time. As soon as I get done with these, I'm going to end up going into some Christmas ornaments and Christmas gnomes and that sort of thing. But this is number 1 of the wand section. In a second here, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of them. And I have, like I said, the second one ready to go for later today if I get around to upload those. And then I will probably do the majority of the wands. And you can see them laying in the background there. There's 7, I think, sitting on that stump. And they take, like I said, 2 to 3 hours. This one I'm sanding. This one is out of the elm wood, which turns out to be a really nice darker wood rather than the basswood. And I've got most of the blanks I have are elm wood now that I've cut out. There's they go into a box. Just to give a presentation, a very simple box. There's a video on the channel. The easiest way to get to that would be obviously to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, it doesn't cost anything to subscribe. And there is Professor Snape's wand, and I'll do a video on that. And that would get some tissue paper in the box, and then it would go on the shelf at Ollivander's or wherever. And interestingly enough, just a tidbit, I looked up Ollivander's when I was researching these wands and whatnot, and it turns out that there are 7 or 8 in the Potter series. I don't know where they got the information from. 7 or 8 major wand makers. Of course, it doesn't do any good to put the name on the box of who made that. Number 1, it's copyrighted, and you kind of want to stay away from that. People get sensitive about other people selling their stuff or making up and copying stuff. So, a bunch of boxes. There's a video on the box. There's a bunch of wands in there. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Always leave a comment. I enjoy reading the comments, and I'll answer you if I can get a chance. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.